In this video, we're going to go back in time a little bit, back when Pixelborn was still around, and we're going to take a look at one of the final iterations of Ruby Amethysts. I guess you can call it towards the beginning of the format, and the purpose of this video is to show you basically how you can evolve the deck list based on what it was in set 3, what you tried to adapt into it, because obviously in this list you can see here we have like Rafiki, the 1-drop, which was a staple in the set 3 metagame for Ruby Amethyst, but has more or less phased out in favor of Chernobog followers and potentially the new Magic Broom, Illuminary Keeper in set 4. Now, I don't think Rafiki is necessarily a bad option, but I think in Ruby Amethyst you do value the card draw a little bit more, given that you have Emerald Steel doing what it's doing in the meta. Whereas in the set 3 meta, yes, Emerald Steel was still very tough, but you didn't necessarily want to draw into Emerald Steel because of things like Prince John, whereas in set 4, you can afford to outdraw the discard that Emerald Steel, at least the version that's going around right now with Bucky, opts to play. In this particular matchup, though, we're going up against the Amber Amethyst deck that won the very first North American Lorcana challenge, which I believe was Atlanta, if I remember correctly. But this was basically Joshua's list, and I think there's a few adaptations for set 4, so props to this player trying to make something work with this list. But I think that with the addition of things like Brawl in my hand, as you can see here, Sisu and Flynn Rider, these kind of slower decks that grind out victories with card advantage through things like Perdita and the Fairy Godmother just aren't as strong as they used to be, well, basically a set ago, right? But the turn 1 Cinderella and the turn 2 Cusco does have the opponent setting up very nicely on curve. We are able to curve out nicely as well with the Snake into the Sisu. And this Sisu is just a huge body. So on 3, they drop a Piglet. So that's probably what they drew for turn, because I imagine you'd want to drop that on 2 so that you can quest with it on 3 after you've established your third character, giving the Piglet the +2 lore. So here, we're going to go ahead and ink the Rafiki that we bounced back with the Mim Snake, and then we're just going to clean up the board state a little bit. And what's kind of crazy about, well, not crazy, but what's nice about Ruby Amethyst is you can build this deck so many different variations, or so many different ways with different variations, but the core of the deck remains the same. Like, you're still playing a lot of the Madame Mim and Merlin cards, you're still playing Queen's Castle, you're still playing Madame Medusa, Maui's, etc. So the core of the deck and the gameplay remains fairly the same, and that's why I think you've seen some top players stick with Ruby Amethyst, because it's a deck that they know. They just have to learn some new matchups, some new interactions, but for the most part, they're very comfortable playing that deck. And if you're one of the people that have been on this deck since the beginning, it does fluctuate in and out of the format in terms of its matchups, but I do think for the past couple, well, basically, maybe not last format, but this format, it's actually in a decent spot. Maybe not this iteration, but the one that ended up winning the CCS 2K that opted to put back in Maleficent. And we'll take a look at an updated Ruby Amethyst deck list for Store Set Champs very, very soon. I'll make a video on that. But that list, I think, is very interesting. Here you can see just the domination of Ruby Amethyst doing what it needs to do. And this was a deck that the Amber Amethyst list that Joshua ran in Atlanta was supposed to do very well against. Obviously, they beat Ruby Amethyst in the finals to win that Lorcana challenge. But here, this opponent is just a little bit too far behind. I mean, they were on the draw, I believe, anyway, so we do have the advantage there. But they have no way to deal with this Queen's Castle, and the draw and lore gain off of this is just going to be too much for the opponent to deal with. They eventually drop a Mufasa, which is a sticky card and represents, you know, replacing itself once it's outed. But the draw 3 there off the double snake on the castle just out advantages any kind of setup the opponent's going to try for with the Perditas and the Mufasas, etc. So we're going to use one snake and take out the Piglets and drop a goat. We are testing out Dragonfires in this format as well. You know, obviously not nearly, like, not needed at all. You don't need Brawls and Dragonfires. I don't remember why I teched this in to try to, or what I was trying to beat with this card. Maybe Tamatoas and stuff, but the Brawls and the Be Prepared that you put back into the deck now, it maybe wasn't being run as much in this particular I guess era of the format, early on in the format of set 4, because people were really fearful of Ursula Deceiver ripping songs out of your hand. And so I think maybe I was opting to put a Dragonfire in because it was an action. It was 2 less than to Be Prepared. Yes, it's not a board wipe, but it can take out a big threat, which is what I kind of wanted. So that's why I was testing this, but I think it's pretty much established now that the Be Prepared is the option. And I was also testing the 8-drop Sisu in Ruby Amethyst, which, as we've come to learn, is not really a card suited for this build, since it's a dead card in your hand. I mean, it is a 3-quester, but it doesn't do anything if you can't play it and your opponent has nothing that can be banished off of it, so it can be very weak in that regard. And it costs 8, so it's very expensive to play, despite you playing the shift target. So unfortunately, the opponent only hits a Chernobog Followers off of that Mufasa, and I'm not even going to let them quest and draw with it. We're just going to take it out with the goat. And we still have 2 characters on the Queen's Castle. We're going to quest with the other snake, go to 10, ink something, and play the rabbit probably. So we ink, okay. Yeah, I probably would opt, looking back at this, I probably would opt to keep crab. But yeah, we just draw rabbit, and now we're just in a very, very strong spot. There's almost nothing the opponent can do here. I guess they could like crab fox if they have it to take out the castle, but then I still have my characters on board, and then I just follow through with, you know, questing for one, etc., and just finish off the game. Now, this Chernobog that comes down was a big surprise, and I was like, oh, well, that is very spicy. Well, not spicy. I guess this was run at 1 in Joshua's list, and they do have to spend ink to play it. And here we draw some more of the, you know, air quotes, new cards at the time when the set first came out in the Flynn Rider. We're gonna go ahead though and utilize that Dragonfire, I imagine, right about now. Okay, sing friends first with rabbit. Do we even need to do that? Yeah, we're just gonna Dragonfire. And do we opt to drop a Flynn Rider here, because we know the opponent has no mass removal, and I think in this format you do need some form of aggressive removal. While Amethyst provides some of that, I don't think it does enough in combination with Amber to make this deck viable still in this format. I do think you need to run either, unfortunately, Steel or Ruby if you're playing any kind of mid-range deck. Of course, if you're playing aggro, you can run like Emerald Amethyst or even Amber Amethyst as the full aggro version and just try to win the game before the opponent establishes any kind of control. But yeah, this is just not going to be enough from the opponent's end here. This Flynn Rider will also clutch out the game now because the opponent opted not to challenge the goat with the Peter Pan Shadow, because again, it wouldn't matter because they would lose their shadow, which means I would have the only character on board, and then yeah, I gain the 3 lore no matter what. So the opponent just ends up scooping once they realize it's game over. Now in this next matchup, again, just showing you whatever I had recorded with Ruby Amethyst. And I think this person was actually one of the top people on the leaderboards. Maybe it's like an impersonator or something. Don't really remember, but I do remember the name, seeing it on the leaderboards. But regardless, here we're on the play, so that's really strong. Going into a Minnie Mouse turn 1. So again, just different things that you would be testing. In this version, I was probably running Teeth and Ambitions in order to help better deal with Diablo. The opponent inks a Sorcerer's Hat, so very spicy, and drops a Rafiki. And yeah, they're on Sapphire Amethyst, a color combination you have not seen really at all in the metagame. But it doesn't mean it's not worth testing and it's not worth trying out. The opponent thinks for a while here, and oh man, don't tell me this is one of those. Okay, they do end up passing. People who forget to pass or something, you know, it happens. We're going to drop the Flynn Rider here, and because the Rafiki is a 0-2, they do need to put something on board with 2 or more strength in order to at least stop me from getting the 3 lore, because while the Rafiki does go to a 3-2 when it's challenging, it unfortunately has 0 strength on board itself, which means the Flynn Rider will proc unless they put another character on board. Now, being on purple, I don't think blue really has anything that's too strong that they can drop in the 2 slot, but they would essentially need a snake in order to offset this Flynn Rider. They do not have it, and as a result, we gain 3 off Flynn. Now we feel comfortable to quest because we're going to bounce back the the Minnie Mouse with the Mim, and then use it to crash into the Rafiki. And I don't know if the opponent just thought, you know, there's no way or just forgot about Mim Fox or something, but that interaction right there probably just wins me the game by turn 3. So get the advantage, right? Get the board presence, out of threat, get +1, and then get ink as well in the form of the Minnie Mouse. Follow up, I have the Flynn Rider with a 4 body on board now. At least the opponent has their own Mim Fox, and they're going to opt to crash. I probably would not have crashed, because crashing there means that my Flynn Rider procs, whereas if they don't crash, they have a 4-3 body. I have a 4-3 body. The Flynn Rider doesn't proc, and then you'd have to put me on. You need an out to a readied Mim Fox, which I didn't have or don't have. I mean, I would have had it with the drawn Be King Undisputed, but it probably wouldn't waste that on a Mim Fox. I'd probably just quest with my Mim Fox. So it's probably worth me questing with the Mim Fox instead of gaining 3 lore off of the Flynn. Yeah, it looks like the opponent is really hurting. They have nothing that's big enough to drop before on 4 ink or less that can contest this Flynn Rider. Now we have the Sisu down, and the Sisu Flynn Rider combination basically is going to close out the game. I don't even need to worry about this castle because I will outrace it with the Flynn Rider by itself. The opponent does have 4 cards in hand now after they ink the Aurora there, and they're going to go ahead and drop another Cusco and probably move Cusco. Nope, they bosses on a roll. Okay. So again, just a deck that's way too slow to get things going. Into tempo-based decks like Ruby Amethyst or aggro decks, you would basically just straight up lose this kind of matchup. And you see the Sapphire decks really suffer with this, like Sapphire Steel, Sapphire Ruby, where aggro-oriented decks like Amber Steel, Amber Amethyst, even the aggro version, Amber, what's a lot of Amber Emerald or Emerald Amethyst, can really outpace these tempo and control-based decks. Of course, their weakness is other steel decks, so with Emerald Steel being so popular, you probably don't see too much of the aggro variants in the meta, but if you do run into them, you have to make sure you know how to play into them, otherwise they could definitely run away with the game. But at this point, I think the opponent realizes that I have obviously a game-winning state on board. There's nothing that they can do to out all of the characters before I can quest for game. Plus, I can basically close the game out with a goat. This is why Ruby Amethyst continues to be a threat, is because even if you play into mass removal, you likely will quest and establish enough lore early enough that you can close the game out with goats, castles, and or spellbooks if you're playing those. But that's going to go ahead and wrap up the video. The opponent just ends up scooping here once they realize there's nothing they can do. If you did enjoy this old school gameplay, let me know. I do have some higher level matches with other decks recorded still on Pixelborn, so if you're interested in seeing those before we run out of footage, make sure you're subscribed and drop a like on the video. It would be appreciated. Thank you again for watching though. Quantum is out.